Hey, Professor Homa here with WDO1 Business Letter Exercise, our first assignment for our CSE 112 class. And this is an easy one, but I think everybody should know how to put together a business letter. And this is kind of a block style that you're seeing here, although we will put a tab so that the date and the closing with your name is going to be kind of indented. We're not indented, we're actually going to set a tab for that. But this document that you're looking at has some labeling on it indicating the margins, indicating where you're putting returns. Everything that you need is pretty much on here, and it also labels the parts of a business letter. The inside address, the salutation, the date, the return address, just so you know what order it goes. Probably a good thing to keep if you ever need to put together a cover letter or a business letter. Okay, I'm going to get started right away in Word, and I'm just going to launch Word. And this is in Windows. And we're going to start from scratch. Now, on your instructions, a couple things we'll start off with is just making a new document, and it has a new document here. If you don't have a new document set up, you could always go File, New, and go to Blank Document, but I have one already. I'll go back to my File tab. So here's my document right here. Now, a couple things on here. Now, I'm not necessarily going in the order that's on the sheet, but if you notice here, I am seeing my rulers. Now, if you're not seeing your rulers, you could go to View, and there's a little check bar for ruler. That's about all that you need for that. Now I'm going to go back to my Home tab, and I'm going to go to my sheet and just check the order here. Okay, now number 3 on the sheet says adjust the page margin, so there's an inch on the top and bottom and an inch and a quarter on the left and right. Now you could go to Page Layout and go over here to Margins, Page Layout tab on your ribbon and Margins. And you could go down here to Office 2003 Default, because that actually is top, bottom 1 inch, left, right 1 1/4. Another place to go to set custom margins is Custom Margins, and that brings up the page setup box where you could actually put your margins in here as well. And you can see on here it has, these are set up for an inch all around, so I could change it here as well and type in 1.25 for the left and right. So that's another place to do it. And then hit OK, and then I'm set up, and now my margins they're a little narrower on the left and right. Now some people will say have an inch all around. Depending on how much information you have on your cover letter, you could go anywhere between an inch and an inch and a half, but you probably don't want to go too close to the edge. You don't want to be like a ½ inch from the edge. Okay, moving on to number 4, we're going to put on the Show Hide button under the Home tab. And that's this button here, which will indicate these little returns and tabs and spaces. We'll be able to see all the things that normally they won't print, but we'll know where we're putting returns and where we're putting spaces and tabs and things like that. So we'll put that on. Rulers, number 5, we already have rulers on. Number 6, what we're going to do, and now this is important, even if you've worked with Word, if you type something in, let me just show you something. I'll just type in some gibberish and hit return, and I'll hit something else and hit return. Now it looks like it's in double spacing when I do that, but it's actually not double spacing. If I'd actually go into my paragraph dialog box launcher, which we'll be using quite a bit, this little area here in the Home tab for paragraph, if you go in here, what you'll see is we don't have double spacing. It's actually at 1.15, which is a default. But what we do have, spacing is set for, a space after setting is set for 10 point. That means every time you hit a return, it's going to put 10 point spacing after the return. And that's okay when you're typing paragraphs, but for what we're doing right now, I want to take that out. Okay, so the first thing I'll do, I could even just delete everything here, and I'm going to go back here to my paragraph dialog box launcher, and I'm just going to go to this area in the middle here and just turn that down to 0. Okay, now before I hit OK, we'll just kind of combine these steps. Before I hit OK, spacing down to 0, and maybe it already is at 0, but a lot of times on the Windows version of Word, it puts that default setting in there. So I'm also going to go to tabs. We're going to set a tab, and we can do it right from the beginning, because this will set it for the whole document. Now tabs, some people are afraid of tabs, but they're actually pretty easy. What we're going to do, in this area up at the top, we're just going to type in 3.5, and that's where our tab stop position is going to be. Ignore this part over here. It's a left alignment. We're not having any leader. We'll talk about leaders later. And just hit set, and that puts the tab down here in your list of tabs. We'll only have 1. And then just hit OK. Now, nothing will happen because we just set a tab stop, and actually you could see it up here on the ruler. That's where our date and our closing is going to be. But we're going to do that once we hit our tab key, once we get to that part. So the next part of this is actually going to be just typing some stuff. So I'm just going to start typing now, and this is where you'd put your name, and I'm just going to type your name, and you could put your name in here. You don't have to put your personal information. You could put bogus information or change some things if you don't want to put your actual name and address. I don't really care either way. You're just sending it to me. But whatever you want to do, that's up to you. So, I'm going to type some things in here before I get started. Now, if you notice, when I started typing, I'll just type my name in here. Okay, you notice it's in a sans serif font. And actually, what I'd like you to do on this is actually make sure you change the font and put it in something like Cambria, at least, or Times New Roman. Okay, so just make sure it's on that font. I think I have that on the list, but if not, I'll put it on your document. But you should be in a serif font. Serif font means it has the little feet at the bottom, which we'll talk about later. So again, now when I hit return, notice that the next line, whatever, I'll just throw in an address here and put an address here. I'm just making up stuff here. And what I'm going to do also, and let me fix this, and what I'd like you to do is just to put in a phone with a colon, and then just put the 908 dash. Don't put parentheses, just put 908 dash, since we always use kind of the 334. Just put the 3 numbers dash. I'll just put a bogus number in here. And then pretty much just put your email address, and I'll just put email with a capital E, and email at gmail.com, whatever it may be. And that's pretty much all you need at the top. That's your return address. So you pretty much need your name, address, a phone. It could be a cell or a home number, or you could just put one number if it's going to be your cell number. And again, make sure you put a space after the colon here and a space here. I should just put, your name. And that's pretty much the return address. Okay, and then we're going to do 2 returns and then the date. And you can do an insert date. You could go over here and look for insert date if you want. Here's date over here, where you could throw in the date if you want. You could do it that way. That's one way to do it, or you could write it out, or you could type it out, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to hit a double return again, and I'm going to start my inside address, which is actually the part that goes to the company. Okay, and here's the information for the company, and notice I put the name of the company first. Then if you have a person's name, you could put in here attention, whatever their name is. If you don't have a name, you could just put Director of Human Resources or something like that to get it to the right department, and then finishing off the address. Now, one thing here that I didn't do yet, and I should do, I just noticed this, that everything should probably be in 12 point. So I'm going to make sure that everything here is in 12 point for what I do from here on out. Typically it defaults to 12 point, but it was in like 11 point Calibri when I started the document. So make sure everything's in 12 point Cambria or Times New Roman when you do that. Okay, and then I'm going to have 2 returns again, and then here's 1 return, 2 return, and then right here is where I'm going to start my salutation, and that's where you could do the dear whatever. If you don't have a name, I do this. I'll just do attention, Human Resources Director. If you don't really have a name or contact name, you could just do that. And then the double return again, and then start your letter. And I'll put in all the letter stuff and just finish this up in a minute. Alright, here's my letter that I wrote in here, and notice there's some errors in here that I wanted you to spell check and correct. But here's my letter, and notice I put 2 returns between each paragraph here to separate them out. And the last thing I'm going to do here is put an extra return, and I'm just going to type sincerely, comma, and then I'll put like 4 returns, and then I'll put my name, and you could put your name, and you could put an extra return here. That's 3, I think, and that makes 4. We're counting these as 4 returns. And now for a standard block letter, you can have everything off to the left side, but I like to actually tab these over. So one thing I'll do is just go here and hit tab. And remember, we set that tab at 3.5 inches, so there's that tab. And I'll just click my cursor here and just hit tab, and I'll click here and hit tab. You can also indent it over, but what you want to avoid doing is hitting tab, 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 tab. So we'll go over tabs so you're not doing that all the time. But this is that's pretty much the document. So again, it was pretty easy. There wasn't a whole lot to do here. The only last thing I'll do is I'll spell check, which you can just highlight everything by doing Control A, and you could go down here. There's a little icon down here to check errors, and it'll go through and find some things, and it found my name, and I could ignore that. Now also I'll do a Control A again, and another place for spell checking is go to Review and Spelling and Grammar, and it's going to find a bunch of things here. And this is probably for a letter like this, you'd probably want to use this. It's coming up with Flint Hill, which I'll ignore. This found a double spacing in here, so I'll change it. Actually, there's 2 spaces after with, which I don't want. And familiar spelled wrong, I'll change that. Companies is spelled wrong, it's this one. And there's my name again, and I think I should ignore all of that, and I'm done. Now, one thing just to remember here is after sentences, you don't have to put 2 spaces after a period. That's from the old typewriter kind of rules. You only have to do 1 space after a period, so that's fine. So this is your document, and we're pretty much done. All that you have to do now is do a file, save as, and you can save this just as a Word document. And remember, I mentioned that you should set up a folder with directories of Access. I don't know if we're going to use Access, if we'll have time to use Access in the summer, but definitely Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And go into your Word file and go into Assignments, and then we're just going to save this as, and I'll go into this one. You don't have to make a folder, but I'm just going to save this as WDO1, and I'll use an underscore, and I'll call it Business Letter, and then underscore, I'll put my last name, first initial. You don't have to put .doc, it'll do it automatically. So just like that, saving as a Word document. Now if you're in 2010 or 2007, it's going to save it with docx. You can, if you want to save it as an older version, you could always do the 97 through 2003. That'll save it as just .doc. If you know you're sending it to somebody who may have an older version, you could do that. You shouldn't really have a problem for something like, for a letter, maybe that may be the safest thing to do. And I like to do that a lot. Even when I put things up on Blackboard, sometimes I'll save them as a .doc if people have older versions. So that's all you really have to do. Hit save, and then you're pretty much done.